Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, I'll be reviewing the new full-sized handbrake from the guys at VNM, made from thick aluminum plates and sporting a 100-kilogram Maven load cell. I will also be testing the latest updates that VNM has come out with for their shifter that they sent me along with the handbrake. Time to put them through the SRG's review process and see how they do. So, let's get to it. Let's take a closer look at this handbrake from VNM. Out of the box, you can tell you have a very high quality build in your hand. It's just professionally executed. I mean, everything is just well finished everywhere I look. The edges have no burrs on them. The finish has no glitches anywhere or lightness anywhere I look. It's just everywhere. It's just a fine looking piece of equipment. And I do like full-size controls, and that's what I would call this. Once we have it mounted, we have a nice big handle here that has a taper on it. It's substantial in hand, considering the construction that we have here, aluminum plate. It comes in at almost 3 pounds, 2 pounds and 14 ounces, which is 1.3 kilos for everybody else in the world. And all the plates here are very thick aluminum bits. We have 8mm aluminum plates, which come out to about 5/16 plate in standard Imperial. We have 8 here, we have an 8mm here, we have 8mm down here, and we have it in the handle up here. Now we also have some 4mm plates here that work as a rocker arm, and the way this assembly works here, it rotates on this shaft in here. And the thickest plate we have is the mounting plate back here, and this is 10mm or about 3/8 of an inch thick, and it has some pre-drilled holes here, 4 of which, the ones on the outside, have threads tapped in them, and the center ones do not. I believe this is going to be an M6 bolt because that's what comes in the pack. We have the electronics board down here. We have a reset button, and we also have a 4-pin Molex plug. I'm not sure what that's for. Maybe to put it in DFU mode. The manufacturer uses it for something. On the bottom, we have the USB connector, which is a nice connector, not just a USB port sitting there. It's a screw-on, so we can cinch it on and keep it nice and secure. It has 4 pins in it. And it has an integrated key in it. Look on the top there. You see that little key sitting on the top. And that will line up with our other side, which is the female part. And you can see there's a groove on the middle of that. And there's our ring right there that we screw it down and lock it down good. And there's the other end of the USB-A. This USB, it says U green on it. Let's see what that says. Show you guys that. U green. All right. I don't see any other. It doesn't say it's shielded, but it is USB 2.0, not a 3.0. All right. So, how this thing works, actually, you pull on the lever, obviously, and it's going to pivot on this bar that goes through here, shaft, rod, whatever you want to call it. And this is pivoting on sealed bearings. And I see a little bit of them inside here, but I'm going to pull probably one of these plates off when we get to the adjustments, because I'll need to pull something apart to get to the stack so I can adjust the stack. So I'll probably just go ahead and pull this plate off and show you that. But everywhere in here, they're all sealed bearings at every moving point, which gives it that solid feel. There is no flex side to side and that smooth, silky pull that I can feel in it. Of course, we're not going to know exactly how it feels until we have it solidly mounted. I'll give you some more thoughts about that once we get there. Components are all top line here. We have a Maven load cell, 100 kilogram. And sitting on top of that, we have some Fibroflex elastomers or bumpers, whatever you want to call them. And that's, again, industry standard stuff here that's accepted as high quality. So, yeah, VNM definitely is using some good stuff here in their products. This coil spring here looks kind of like a valve spring off an automotive engine head. And this is a yellow one. We have a tensioner here for preload. Little thumb wheel or finger wheel, whatever you want to call it. It's got some nice edging or cut into it, some pattern there, so it grips pretty nice, but it's not so abrasive that it will cut you or anything. Let's see what else we're talking about. The pivot point, I'm going to give you a better look at it here. I think we can get it in the light. You can see how that looks, where the assembly is around where that pivot rod goes. Again, very well done everywhere you look here. You don't see anything wrong. We have a wire coming out, obviously, to the load cell, or from the load cell to the main board. And it has a little cable management clip here. Make sure everything stays nice and safely tucked to the side. Just well thought out, I think. Another Vibroflex here, and that's our silencer, if you will. So when we release the handbrake, it doesn't make any noise. So this is going to be a very quiet unit when you're using it. Yeah, it just feels very solid in hand, as you might imagine. The way to mount this, there's a couple of ways. You have these side pieces here that we can mount it to something like sideways if you wanted to. Of course, you'd have to put your driver through one hole to get to the other, or if you have something really short, you can get inside of there to affix it to the whatever you're putting it on. The bottom obviously is a mount point, and you can put this down like this, and that'll give us the typical regular car you drive every day, Mazda Miata, something like that, handbrake location that should be next to the gearbox tunnel. Or we can stand it up like this, and that's what this mounting bracket, another 8mm piece of aluminum, again, very well done here. We have some holes that have some threads machined into them, M6s, and we have some slots. This will allow me to mount this handbrake and mount the shifter with its mounting holes over here into the same unit. And I'm probably going to put a piece of 40 series straight up and down on my shifter mount over here on this P1X, and then mount this part here to that, secure that, and then we'll have these guys hanging on it. So we'll see how that works out as far as stiffness and flex and things like that. But again, you can mount it like this, and if you mount it like this and you want to have a straight up and down, they give you this, comes with the handbrake. So I can switch this out, put this in, take this handle off with these 3 bolts, and there's 3 on each side there. It will slide off, then we'll slide this in and attach it, and then we'll have these 3 bolts holes up here, which are threaded. Yeah, so these are actually threaded. So we'll go in both sides. It looks like these bolts are going in threaded holes, not just a shaft in here, but threaded holes in each side, and they're long enough so that it can both go in, but we won't know that for sure until I get it apart. So yeah, so you can have a straight up and down with it sitting in that position. But we can't mount it like this unless you have the bracket for it, because you need clearance, obviously, for our USB plug. We got to have some clearance for that. What else can we talk about? Let's talk about the adjustments. Again, we have the yellow spring and this is the white, which I believe is the easiest one. We have a green bumper in here. Again, Vibroflex. I like the quality of the parts that they're putting in this thing. We have some springs here. Again, some look like valve springs, but they're coated, color coded for strength. The yellow is kind of a thin coil, and the blue is a little bit thicker, and then the red is the thickest, so that would be the stiffest. And how you would use this, or I would do this, is I would keep good my preload, and if I couldn't get it to where I felt it was enough tension with the yellow spring, then I would just take the yellow spring out, put the blue one in, and then see if I can get it with the blue one. And not, then we go to the red one. But you really can't tell until you have this thing, again, solidly mounted to a rig, and you're pulling on it, and then you can tell what you want to do. It doesn't look too complicated to change it out, but we'll see when we get there. And last but not least, we have these lighter springs that I can actually push down with my fingers. I couldn't do that with those other ones. And these can be mixed and matched, I would imagine, in here. I don't suppose you could, I guess you could put both of them in there because they're compressed so easily. You would just push them down as you're putting it back into the rocker arm assembly here when you're putting it back together. We get some wrenches, and that's so you can work on your handbrake. And we get some M6 bolts and some washers so that we have a way to mount it. And that's about it as far as what we get in the handbrake kit. I'm going to do another segment on these updates for the shifter that they sent me, because I will be using, again, the shifter in tandem with the handbrake. So I thought I'd just throw that in there so you guys can see what they're doing with that. Now, I did a review on the shifter a while back, so you can go look at my playlist on the shifters, and you'll find the VNM shifter there that I did a review on. Very solid, stout unit in its own right, and again, very well finished, just like the handbrake. It's good to see the second piece. This is only the second thing I've gotten from VNM that is carrying on the quality that they had in the shifter. Yeah, just really well done here. Paint me impressed. I really like what I'm seeing here. But then again, we're going to have to get it mounted and use it to see just how well it's going to perform. Now let's go ahead and take this stack out, the elastomer and the spring in it, and see how we change that out as one of the adjustments. I'm going to take these 2 screws out. There's a screw here, and there's one over here, and these are flatheads, and they have countersunk holes, obviously, in these in this rocker arm assembly on this part of it. And there's a threaded rod going through the bearings in here. What I usually do here, first thing we're going to do is take the preload off, because you don't want any pressure on this joint here as we're taking it apart. Makes sense. So I'll just loosen one side, and because it's threaded on both sides, I'll go over to the other side and get the other one started too, and hold that screw on this side with my finger so that it doesn't turn, and this one will come straight out. But then I kind of want to do the same thing over here. It's just a kind of a back and forth thing to make sure that they come out okay rather easily, because you can get it, if you get one out first and you take the other one, it can spin that rod around in the bearings because the bearings are turning. I'll show you what I mean in a second here. These are the flathead screws, stainless steel units. Like they're M5s, I would say. All right, so now it's just a matter of, now that we have this loose, I'm going to roll this back down a little bit so I got plenty of clearance on this little piece of metal here that's part of the rocker arm. As I push this forward, I'm just going to kind of tilt it forward. See how I can do that? Then I'll put my finger under this washer that's sitting on top of our load cell and lift the whole thing out as one unit, hopefully. There we go. And you can see there's the other end of our rod. Smooth rod at that point. We have some threads on the top part. You'll also see, let's go ahead and pull these off first, and I'll show you the rest of that. This is the bottom washer. You want to make sure that you get this one back on the bottom. It has a extrusion left in it in the machining process, so that it will fit down into the hole that they've drilled. And you gotta be careful, this handle will come down on you, so you want to hold that up. You see the hole they've actually drilled in the load cell to accept that. Then we have the bumper itself, and we have another washer, and this washer is the same thing as that washer, except there's no extrusion on one side or the other, and that's just holding the spring. And here's our spring. This is the yellow one, which is again thinner than the blue one, so it is the lightest weight spring. I think you can tell that when I hold this up here. There we go. So this is the lightest one. I'm probably going to keep the yellow one, I think, but I'm going to go, I think, with the green bumper. So before we do that, put it all back together, I'm going to show you this rod itself. It's smooth all the way up here. Then when it begins to have threads, and that's where our preload nut is, we can obviously put more or less tension on the spring. This is using a kind of a crush system here with this set screw or grub screw, whatever you want to call it. And what that's doing is, once we tighten this down on the threads, on the in between, usually it goes in between the threads, and then kind of crushes everything down a little bit as we're torquing this down. So it locks it in pretty good on the thread. It's not going to turn anywhere because it is a thread that we're locking into. Better than just having a smooth shaft like this and doing the same thing, because there's really not a lot for it to grip on. It'll work, especially if you have one on the opposing side. But yeah, I like this better because this is not going to go anywhere. And we're not putting a lot of twisting torque on it anyway, so it's not that important that we really cinch it down to where it will never move. Now, this is a nice aluminum CNC machine part here that's holding, as you can see, two metal sealed bearings. And you can see inside of here the threading on that sleeve that's going inside of that, both sides. And this will turn. That's what I was telling you about the screw. If you have one still in there and you're trying to unscrew it, this threaded piece that's in there will just screw around. It'll rotate around, rather, inside the bearings races, inside the internal races there. So it's just sitting there spinning, and you can't get it to come out. So you have to hold it on one side or the other. All right, so very nice design, simple, but very effective. And now what we're going to do is put it back together, and I'm going to go with the green one. Again, Fibro Flex. And I'm going to stay with my yellow spring. And the yellow is going to leave some, you can see it leaving some coloration on the washers, the spacers. No big deal. Just thought I'd show that to you. And we'll use this one. Again, this is the flat one without the protrusion, which will go next. And you can see it also has some coloration on it, which you can use as a guide as going back on. You know which way they go. And we're going to put our green Fibro Flex in the stack. Last but not least, again, we want to put that on the bottom so it fits into the hole that's in our load cell. And also, it's up to you. It really doesn't matter. It's aesthetic, really, as far as where the grub screw is showing, or the set screw. You can have it sitting out there like that, or from the factory it ships with it like that. Looks a little dressier without the screw exposed. That's where we're going to put it back in. I'm going to slide that in like that. Now I'm going to, the reason I put this preload down all the way, by the way, is when I slide this in, it doesn't interfere with the metal part of our rocker arm assembly there. But now that I've done that, and now we're in clear, I'm just going to spin it back up. Again, maintaining the handle angle here because I don't want it falling down. So I'm just going to spin this back up and get this to where it'll fall down in the hole. Doesn't look like it's... Okay, maybe it is. Here we go. All right, so now I'm just going to kind of look in there in the hole while I'm putting the screw in, and I'm kind of moving this along with that together as I'm looking in there and putting the screw in. So you know what I'm trying to do here. Go ahead and get one loaded, and you can just load it on the end of your wrench like that. And let's see, I need to come down a little bit, forward, and there we go. I think that's got it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put this one in a little ways. It's already spinning. I know it is because it's not going in as fast as it should. But I'm going to go ahead and put this other screw in so I can hold one or the other as I'm tightening them down. So yeah, there we go. So I'm holding the other one, and it's kind of self-screwing in too when I do that. But once you have this one in, or either one in, they cinch down, so you really don't have to hold anything when you're tightening it down. I can get plenty of torque on this, and it won't spin with one wrench. So you really don't need another one on the other side. You can do it with one. All right, so now that I got it all back together, I'm going to put my tensioner wheel back down so I got some tension on that, and then I'm done. Make sure everything's kind of lined up here as far as in the stack goes. Just don't want it hanging off the edge. If the spring gets loose on you and hangs off the edge, that's not good. You want to bring it back in and try to center it up with your line there of the shaft. And you can leave your little logos out there if you want, so everybody knows that you got a fiber or flex on this. And again, on the bench, it's not really easy to tell if this is something I like or not. But I think I want a stiffer bumper because I had one on another handbrake, a Husingville handbrake, and I preferred it that way, even though there was no spring in that stack. It's just a bumper. Right. So that's pretty simple. Doesn't take much effort. You can do this with it mounted pretty easily, I think. So I kind of like the way that they set this up. So yeah, not a big deal to adjust your stack and put whatever springs and bumpers you want in there. Now we're going to change the angle of our handle assembly here. And there's a few screws to be done here. It's pretty simple, but it is a little bit of involvement, if you will, to get it done. And the first thing you want to do, remember we're going to be using this guy here. So this is if I have it mounted like this, and I don't want the handle to be down here like it would be like in a normal road car. I want it to be sticking up straighter. Then this is what you would do. So all I'm really going to do is take this handle off first. And we have 3 screws on each one. These are button screws, and these are, I believe they're M5s with a 3mm hex on it for the wrench size. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and take the handle off first. So let's go ahead and do that. Just loosen these up a little bit first. And there is threads in this piece here that it's bolting to that run all the way through so that the screws are engaging threads on each side. There is no spacer assembly or anything like that in there. All right, so let's go ahead and get the other ones loose. Pretty simple here, but it just takes a little bit of time to do it. And I don't think you probably do this many times. Once you have it set up on your cockpit the way you want it, chances are you're not going to be changing it much. Go ahead and flip around the other side. Do the same thing. And one more. Always hold it because I don't know what's going to happen when I take the other one out, but it's just sitting there. So that's good. And these are the screws, M5s. Again, button heads with an M3 hex on it. Stainless steel units. The handle will come right off. Ooh. Hear that? Like a tuning fork. Ah, the sound of quality. All right, so this is what we have left. Now, we're going to take this assembly. With my screws and my handle over here, try to keep it organized. And the idea is to put these two screws into these two holes here. Not three, just two. And if you look inside of here, you see that there's a nut on the side or inside that's keeping this screw from coming out. And that's during shipping, or if you're going to be storing it somewhere, you don't lose the nut that way. And it'll be kind of self-explanatory when I take it apart and show you how I'm going to do that. Now, all I'm going to do is take this and unscrew it. And as soon as I start to loosen this, that nut is going to come loose. And I'm going to have to put my finger in there to keep it from turning so the whole thing will come out. So I'm just unscrewing. You see how as soon as I did that, the nut started turning too. So now it's loose, but there's no way it's coming out because the nut's still there. So I'm going to put my finger in here like this and then screw it out. There you go. Now the nut is going to drop. So you want to be ready for that. So I'm going to kind of tilt it down, let gravity help me out here as it comes all the way out. There it is. And we didn't lose it. And you can see it's a rather longish M5 screw in here. And set that aside, and you don't want to lose your nut, and we're going to show you what I'm going to do with that as soon as I get the other one out. And we're going to do the same thing. Try to get my finger in there and keep that nut from turning as I get the screw to exit the hole. What if I get my pinky? It's kind of tight in there. Yeah, I'm going to need some help. So, all you're going to need is something to stick down there and kind of keep it from turning. I'm going to use my little pointer thing. This should work, I think. I'll just stick it up against the nut. And yeah, because it's not real tight. There's not a lot of friction going on here. Almost there. There it is. I got my screw out. And the nut is still in there, but I'm going to tilt it forward and drop it into my hand, I hope. And there it is. Now that we've got that done, we need to loosen these three screws. And the reason is because this is a very tight tolerance right in here. And right now, this is not going to fit in here on this 8mm thick piece here. I mean, I could probably scrape it in and push it real hard, but I don't want to do that. I mean, all you got to do is loosen these up a little bit and it'll slide right on. So I'm going to do that. Let's go ahead and get those loose. Not going to take much. Maybe a couple millimeters sticking out on the screw to get this to where it'll go in very easily. Like that, see? Now it's kind of rattling. So that gives me enough flex or enough room to easily insert this without scratching up my nice finish and line it up. Now, what I'm going to do is slide it on there and just look straight down and line up this hole and this hole. And they are threaded. See the threads in there. Okay, those are M5s. And I'm going to use gravity to help me out here. Put this flat down like this, slide this on, and look straight down. Now, before you do that, there's one thing you do need to do. And that is, there are some recessed holes in here. See those holes? There's one there, and we have one back here. And you see it down back in there. Those are holes that are cut to hold these nuts. What we're going to do is slide the nuts in there and try to get them to, I'll use my pointer to manipulate it a little bit here, and it'll fall right in there. See how it's in there now? And it's fallen in so that the flats on that nut are engaging the flats they've machined into that plate, so it won't turn. Now we got to get the other one in, and it goes towards the back, and that one just fell straight in. Got lucky on that one. So now, again, using gravity to help me out, I'm just going to keep it like this in this orientation so the nuts don't go anywhere, and slide it back on very easily like that. And now all I have to do is take these long button head M5 screws and feed them into the threads. Remember, we still have threads in here, but it's going to go through these threads and then engage the nut that's in the plate down here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Get one started. We'll get this one started. And then we'll go to our speed wrench and see if we can make this happen quickly. Here we go. Oops. All right. And now I'm going to torque them down a bit just to make sure they're engaged well. And that feels pretty good. Now remember, I still have these three guys, rattling, that need to be tightened up. I'm going to do that. Once we get those good and tight, it'll be a very solid connection. You heard a little click there. Trust me, I did not break that aluminum. All right. And then I'm going to go back just for the heck of it and check these and make sure that they're still good and tight. It looks like they are. And there we have it. So now we still have it mounted flat, but we're going to be able to pull up on the handle. So all we have to do now is attach the handle. That's the only thing left. And when this goes back on, there is some clearance on the top where these holes line up. So in other words, it doesn't go all the way down and sit on top like that. It does, but it doesn't. There's a little bit of, you got to wiggle it around up and down a little bit to get the hole started. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. Let me go ahead and get ready to go though. I'm going to go ahead and use this wrench for this. I'm just going to lower it down until I can look through here and see my hole. You can also kind of feel for it if you want. Up and down. And usually the screw will engage like it did right there. Now I'm going to stop and put one on the bottom to keep it from flopping around on me. So we'll do that. Reload it. Go ahead and get it started. There we go. This one in a little bit more. And now it won't move around on me. I'm good to go there. So I'm going to put it back down like this. And put the third one in for this side. And of course, we will go to the other side and do the same thing. All right, there we have it. Now, if you'll notice, we have an angle here that's forward. So it's biased forward. Now, that might be fine for your driving position if that's what you want, but you might want it further back. So what do you do? That'll be the next segment. We'll talk about the angle adjustment that's in this system here that we'll use to change the angle of this. And not only this, but when it was in the other orientation, we could still do the same thing. But I'm going to show you how this angle feature works here. And this thing's going to keep falling over on me now that we got this heavy handle sitting out there like this. But yeah, it will sit there like this. When we come back, we'll talk about adjusting the angles. Now let's take a look at the angle adjustment for the handle on this handbrake. And that will be in this element here. And you can see there's two slots in here. And there's two nuts left in the machining process on the shaft that goes through these spacers and this bumper here that are oriented in a cam kind of position. So when we turn it, it changes where it engages and forces the handle further in. And I'll show you what I mean by that. These are 4mm wrenches here. And over here we have a 4mm, and we just take those out. That's what I'm going to do now. Also, I want to relieve the pressure on my preload so that it's flopping around easy there, because I don't want to have pressure on this when I'm trying to take my screws out, right? Okay, so I'll go ahead and take those out. One loose, the other one loose, and bring it out. Okay, there's one, and these are M5s, and these are socket head cap units, stainless steel. There. And we'll take this one out. And the same thing on this side. Now this will just freely slide out. You don't have to loosen the side plates to do this, which is very nice. I like the way they engineered this. You know, they were forward thinking here. How can you make this easy as possible to make this change? And that's what they've done. Oops. Now there's two loose spacers on here. You just heard one drop, and that's one of them right there. We have another one there. I'll pull that one off. And of course, we have our bumper that slid on very tightly onto the shaft. I could take that off, but I don't see any reason to, because I don't need to show you what's going on here. Now, when they manufacture this shaft, they leave this nut on there. I believe that's how they're doing it. It looks like it to me that they just, when they're CNC machining it, they leave the nut in there as part of the process. Now, right now, this is the stock position, which is what I'm calling 3 o'clock position. See how it's kind of, as we turn it, it changes positions, and we can use the clock as a reference for that. So right here at 3 o'clock, this is the minimal amount of shaft and spacer that's addressing the back of this lever. So it has as much angle as possible forward that it can get. But I want to change the angle back on this because it's a little bit forward. And, you could use it that way. It's all personal preference. Now, the extreme position here would be 180 degrees opposed to this, which would be 9 o'clock. I'd do it this way, and that puts most of the fat part towards the lever, which is going to push it forward and bring it back towards the driver position. Or we have positions in between that. As long as the flats of these nuts on either side engage the groove that's in the plates, it'll slide in and give us the reach that we want. I'm going to try to get mine straight up. Now, the most that you can do again is 180 degrees opposed or 9 o'clock. And to do that, you have to, there's a couple things you can do, but you really need to take the bumper stack out to do that, because you got to be able to push this further down, because it's pushing it so, the lever so far that way that the holes won't line up in here when we have this in there. We have to push it forward to get this to go in far enough to engage the bolts. So you have to take this guy loose if you want to do it that far. Not that hard to do, because we've already seen the adjustments for this. 2 of these bolts out, the stack comes out, and you're good to go, and then you can put it all back together. Or you can find a way to clamp it to a tail or something, and then just pull on it as you're trying to get the screw lined up, or do something like that. I'm not going to go all the way, because I want this to be straight up and down. Something like this, right? If I went all the way with this, like I was talking about, the 180 degree opposed, with as much of that forward as possible, pushing on this, it would be sitting more like this. And I really don't want that layer or that level. So I'm going to try first. Remember, the original is going to be at a 3 o'clock position. I could go 12 o'clock, and that's going to give me a little bit more, or a little bit, maybe, I don't know, 11, 10-ish, somewhere in there. Again, as long as the flats of that nut that's left on there engage, we're good to go on both sides. And of course, the flats are in line with each other on each side, so it's going to go in whichever way you put it. It just has to be there. So what I'm going to try, I'm just guesstimating here. I'm going to try it in, I think, like this. Let's see where that is. Yeah, I'm going to try it like that. They say there's 6 positions you can get out of this. And I think I can line my hole up pretty easily here. I'm looking straight down here to see where it's at. Yeah, I think I can get that done just by pushing down on the lever and lining those holes up. I'll show you what I mean by that. See how the hole is not lined up with it just sitting here? So, but if I pull the lever down, it allows me to push it further in and get that hole lined up, which I can't push it down enough right now because I don't have it on the table. So that's the idea. So I'm going to pull this back out like this, keep that orientation, and then put my spacers back on. Like that, and like that. Now again, I'm going to slide it back in and see where my holes are. Actually, that's not as much because, well, a little bit. Let's see where that's at. And you can kind of look at it and judge it a little bit. I think that might be where I want it, isn't it? No, it's still a little forward, I think. I'm looking in the camera monitor here. Yeah, it's still a bit forward. So I'm going to take it out and push it back a little bit more. And it's a trial and error thing to get it where you want. I'm going to turn it one flat on that nut and slide it back in the slots. Yeah, I think that's where I want it. All right, so now I'm going to, and you're not going to be able, well, maybe I can do it this way. You're not going to see exactly what I'm doing, but I'm just going to move this down to where I can get that hole lined up. That's the idea anyway. And I'll get my wrench and preload, keep this from falling over. Preload my M5 bolt here. Well, this is a ball, by the way, the socket ball tip on this. So it's not easy to hold the bolt when we do that. In fact, I'm just going to kind of stick it here. Push down on that lever with my armpit. See if I can get it lined up. There it goes. All right. So as long as I got the pressure there, it's okay. Like that. So now it should hold while I go around and get the other one. Even though I'm going to have to take the pressure off again to get this one started properly. Because you can see it's still canted because of the pressure that lever is putting on it. So we take the pressure off and we do the same thing over here. This is going to be a little harder because I don't, tell you what, I'm going to do the same thing. Turn around this way so you guys can maybe see what I'm doing. and go ahead and see if I can get it started over here. Okay. And it can be a little fiddly. And actually, this is going to be easier if you have this thing mounted to something. Because you don't have, you just pull down the handle and you don't have to worry about it. This one's going in now. All right. So I did get that started. And now what I'm going to do is, again, take some pressure off of it. Now I got my wrench ready. And do the same thing. Let's do it over here. See how easily it spins when I take the pressure off? Well, we can get them in there. Do the same thing over here. Again, if it was securely mounted to my rig, this would not be a big deal. Or I could probably just clamp this, like I said, to my bench here and use that load cell, the top of the load cell, but I really don't want to clamp down on that if I don't have to. All right, let's see if we were successful here for that adjustment. There we are. Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. Or somebody might want something different depending on your cockpit, but that's all you need right there. For me, that's straight up and down. That's the way I like my handles to be oriented. And when I have it straight up and down going the other way, which I'll be using it this way, like I discussed before, if you've been following along in the video, I'm not going to use this. But I did want to show you guys how this worked. And of course, once we're done with that final adjustment, we're going to go back in and make sure that we get this good and tight so that it's properly seated in those slots that are milled into our side plates, and everything is nice and tight and won't have any issues when we're using it. And I can put some preload on it or take some preload off, make it a little easier. Actually, I put some preload on it when I have it at that angle. So, yeah, it actually feels okay. All right. So that's it. That's how you adjust the angle on it. And again, we could take this stack out to make it easier. It would just be flopping all around, and we just put it in and then put our stack back in. The guys at VNM sent me some upgrades that or updates, if you will, that they've made to their shifter, their H-pattern / sequential shifter. Now, I did a review on this shifter a while back. This thing is built like the proverbial tank. It's very heavy duty. It has good tactile feedback, but they have made some updates to some of the design elements, and they sent that with their handbrake that I'm reviewing here, obviously. And I thought they were worthy of adding to this review so you guys can see what's going on with the updates and what is shipping currently compared to what I had when I did the original review on this VNM H-pattern / sequential shifter. Now, first thing we'll talk about the knob. As the knob sits now, the original one, it has an insert that is mounted to our shaft here. That is a slick shaft. There's no threads on this at all. And there's an insert that's attached by set screws. And then we put this down on top of that and tighten it down. Now, it's not a bad fit, really. I can't really complain about it. There is just a little bit of movement on this. But remember, we have set screws engaging a smooth surface here, which works. It doesn't go anywhere. I didn't have any problem of it moving or anything. But they made an improvement and decided to do something differently, and I'll show you what that is. First, we'll look at this. Go ahead and unscrew this knob. There it is. You can see we have those threads deep inside the knob there. And we have this guy. And that's the threaded insert. And it has a set screw here. And we have a set screw over here on the other side, 180 degrees opposed. And they're pressing in or biting into this shaft to keep this from moving up and down or spinning or doing anything like that. Now, it's not the optimal way to obviously attach a knob to a shifter shaft, but it did get the job done. And I never had a issue with it coming loose or twisting around on me. So it did get the job done. But they've come up with a different system, which I personally like a lot better. And I'll show you what that is. But first I want to remove this one. And that is a 1.5, or no, what is it? A 2 point. It's a 2 millimeter set screw size for the hex wrench in here. I'm going to go ahead and loosen one side, loosen the other. And you can see it came loose pretty quick. And then take it off. And that's what it is. And it's an aluminum bit. Get the big threads on it there. You got this hole. milled in the bottom there too. Not sure what that was for. Anyway, now we have this assembly. And you can see we have this big knurled knob on the bottom of our H-pattern ball type shifter knob. And yeah, easy to take on and off. We get a good grip on it there with that knurling. You can see there's the hole in the middle. And I'm going to go ahead and take this apart and show you how this is working. It's very similar to a drill collet or on a milling machine or a lathe, the collets that they use for drill bits. Same kind of system here. You can see we have threads here on this big piece I just took off, and they're going to fit down inside of the knob. You can see our collet sitting in there. I'll go ahead and take that out. And there's the collet. So you see it's a tapered unit, and the shaft goes in this way. And as we squeeze by screwing this down, we're squeezing or pushing this down into another tapered washer system in here that squeezes this guy together, which again, in turn, tightens down on the shaft itself. All right? Just like a drill bit. Now I'll show you what's inside of here. First, we have this plastic washer, it looks like. And then we have a spring. We can't really see too well in there what's going on. There's a taper in there. Then there's a spring. So the spring goes back in like this. We get our washer in. Put our collet in. Can't forget that, or we're just messing around, not getting anything done. And I'm going to go ahead and put this in to contain it so it doesn't go anywhere. So now we're going to put this on the shaft. Get my wrench out of the way. And there is a certain engagement here. You can see how far down it goes. That's pretty far down for like wrist action shifting if you want to do that. There is a minimum engagement we're going to need on this collet in here for the shaft. I would say probably around there. I'm going to go ahead and screw this down while I'm screwing both of these together. And as I compress this together, by screwing it together, that collet gets pushed down into the other section that's inside the handle here that causes it to squeeze on that collet. 360-degree equal pressure all the way around, which is nice. Just like a drill bit, like I said, if you're putting it on a drill press or something. I'll go ahead and tighten this down. And I can feel there's like no movement in this knob now at all, as I would expect. And yeah, very tight. So that feels pretty good. Yes. So I like what they've done here. They are not sitting on their laurels over at VNM. They're actually thinking about better ways to do or implement their solutions for sim racing. And this is a very good upgrade or update to the system. All the new shifters will be sending in, or being shipped out rather, with this on it. Go ahead and take it loose again, pop it off. And of course we have the sequential shifter that's doing the same thing. Now you want to make sure this is loosened a little bit when you put these on. And that would probably go, I'd say about right there. Go ahead and tighten these together. That. Yeah. That feels pretty good. Obviously, this is not a sequential shifter plate, though. It's the H-pattern shifter. So yeah, I like the way that's feeling. I'm going to go ahead and take this back off to show you the other updates that they have for the system. These knobs over here. And this is a sequential plate you see here. Originally, we had this one. And we have two very large ball bearings, and they are sandwiched into some channels that are milled into this aluminum bar here on the inside, and they ride back and forth as the shaft is in between them, pushing back and forth. Obviously, the springs keep the tension on the balls, and it feels like you're slapping up against something to shift. Not a real tactile click feeling to it, like you're turning a gear that is attached to another gear or shaft that is attached to another gear that is attached to the shaft, the selector shaft that rides on top of a sequential shifter. Yeah, that wasn't there as far as the feeling. Now, a lot of sequential shifters these days, though, are activated by electric solenoids. So you're really just pushing against button on your sequential shifter handle. But yeah, I still like the mechanical part. Like if you're riding your bike, if you have a bike and you're shifting, you feel that mechanical click with the front of your foot when you're shifting, or the bottom when you're shifting up or down. So yeah, that was missing in this, even though this did a good job. I didn't really mind slapping it around. It's very heavy duty, very well built. The machining is very good, just like with everything from VNM. But yeah, now they've come up with something a little different. This is the new assembly. And this part of the assembly looks to me to be exactly the same. which nothing wrong with that, except we have a piece left in the milling here to support a bolt. And that bolt is the pivot point for this little arm here. And the pivot point has a sealed bearing in it. See it in there. And this little lever here is going to be pushed back and forth when we put the shaft in between the balls. When the shaft goes in between the balls, and it goes into the slot right there, or the fork, whatever you want to call that, and we're pushing it back and forth, now we're manipulating this guy against that ball bearing here in this piece that has a spring behind it. You can see it has this brass bushing here. I've always called it a bushing, but it's really not being in a bushing mode right now. It's just a holder for the ball bearing. So it's a nice piece of brass there. Everything, again, very well machined. You can't even feel that across there. And then we have the ball not sitting in aluminum, but that ball bearing is actually in a pocket that they've milled out in this brass piece. It's sitting in there, the insert. And then, of course, we have a spring captured behind that ball. So it gives us the tension. So now, when we shift, we have a click. Goes against the ball. It does that. Yeah, they go the other way and that way, like that. So now we're going to have some more tactile feedback, if you will, when we're actually making the shift. Now, obviously, this is not bolted down. It's not bolted onto the shaft. So this, I'm not sure if this is even going to work, but I'm going to go ahead and put it down. I'm not going to scratch up my top here, but just feel it. Yeah, you can actually hear that click too now. Yeah, this is going to be better. Yeah, no doubt. And again, just well built, well machined. They just know what they're doing over there at VNM. They do a great job with everything I've seen so far from them. So there you have it. Those are the updates or upgrades, how you want to look at it. And that's with the shifter that you buy today. We'll be shipping with these parts, not the old parts. So you'll be getting these type of knobs with the collets, and you'll be getting this new sequential system here. This is the result of attaching the mounting bracket that came with the Handbrake. You can see it attaches to the shifter. I'll flip that around so you can see what's going on. I'm probably going to source a couple of more of, there was 2 other M6 bolts in here, but it didn't have the larger washers, which I have some. I'm going to source those and put them on here. So I've got 4 bolts holding the shifter. Even though when I'm using it and pushing back and forth between these guys, it doesn't feel like it's really twisting or anything. So 2 might be enough once I get the final torque down on them. But this is how I mounted it. You can see the shifter is in the bigger slots. These are actually wider slots than these slots. And I got 4 M6s engaging the handbrake itself. Now, remember, I have to have this part hanging off in the air, or I won't be able to get my cable on, right? What I tend to do is put a piece of 40 series profile on my shifter mount that is also profile, and then put some T-nuts on here and slide it into this profile and tighten everything down. Now, I could use M6 bolts into this profile, but I'd rather use an M8 and an M8 T-nut. Just a little bit more holding power, because this is going to be suspended in the air. I really can't sit it down, because once I have this attached to my profile, I got a corner bracket here, I got a corner bracket over here. And of course, this is going to be taller. This is just a sample piece. So the corner bracket is going to be sticking out, obviously, on the bottoms, right? Sticking out this way, and over the other side, it's going to be sticking out that way. So I have to have clearance for this. It won't have to be sitting up too much in the air, but I'll never get this flat down, I don't think. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's going to clear the corner bracket in between here. So I might have to have it up in the air a little bit, right? All the more reason for me wanting the M8 in here. Now, again, this is an M6 hole. They've already got milled in there. You can see the threads in there. We have them here, we have them here, and here. Not sure what they're for, but there they are. Just different mounting situations. So, if I was mounting this, let's say to a metal post or something, a piece of wood, what have you, on this side, something like this, obviously a lot thicker than this, and it had a hole in it that don't have threads in it, then this would be where this would shine, right? You put it through your hole, and then you put it in the threaded piece there, put another one there where you have a hole, and there you have it. You're securely mounted. But if I try to go through these threads with an M6 bolt, the threads are going to limit how far I'm going to be engaging the T-nut in this channel. because it's going to hit a limit. Once this socket head cap reaches that point right there where it's flush against the metal on this, it's going to stop, regardless of whether my T-nut is engaged properly on the threads or not. So, yeah. You know, there's probably a trial and error way I could get this to work. But I really don't want to drill this out, but I'm about ready to do that. And there's enough space in here between the shifter and the handbrake. My hand out of the way. There's enough air in there for me to get some M8 socket head cap bolts. Plenty of room in there for that. So it'd be coming out this way through a hole that I've drilled. I would just drill out these holes over there in my drill press. And then I'd have the bolt coming out, obviously, and then engaging the T-nut in here. I might try it with the M6 first just to see if I can get it to work. Because I really hate, you know, doing stuff like that, drilling new holes. But I would like to have seen some kind of an option here for that. You know, a bigger hole and also no threads in it. So you could attach it directly to the profile. Now this might work. It might work. Where I don't have any problems. I'm securely in there against the T-nut in my channel, and I don't have any flex. That's the biggest thing. I don't want any flex when I'm pulling on the brake or I'm whacking on the shifter, sequential shifter. Which, by the way, feels good with that new element in there. You can actually get a click now when you're whacking it instead of just a kind of a mute stop it to each stroke there, like that. But now I'm getting a little bit of a click there. You can hear it. Definitely a tactile difference. But I will try to mount this in the 40 series with the M6s and see how it goes. If it works, fine. But it's just something that I'm always thinking about from an engineering perspective, because I like everything to be as solidly mounted as possible. And I don't think the M6s are going to do it for me. But I could be wrong. But what we're going to do is go over and get this mounted, get it all set up, and then take a look at the results and which way I decided to go in the end. Here is the final solution I came up with for the mount. I did use the mount bracket like we discussed previously in the other segment, and I did use a 40 series piece of profile. You can see it's going straight up and down. It's mounted to the stock shift mount that comes with your P1X, and I have two corner brackets down there. And like I said, there's the clearance for the corner brackets between the shifter and the handbrake down there. It just wasn't enough. You can see where it's kind of, yeah, that's a better look at it there. So you can see it's interfering. So I had to have the shifter up in the air a bit. Now, not having the shifter sitting down on this rail will cause it to not be as stable as it could be if it was. I would probably, if I was going to use this setup every day as my normal everyday type of control for sequential and handbrake, I would come up with something else. I might figure out a different way to do this so I had it more solidly mounted. But this is such a big shifter, like most of the box type shifters that are manufactured today. You know, they take up a lot of room, so yeah, you have to compensate for the real estate they take up. The handbrake, not so much. It's pretty slim, as you can see there. And I'll show you the bracket. There's the handbrake. I've mounted that with 4 bolts. And over here on the shifter, I have 2 bolts. Let's see if I can get around here and show you guys that. Here we go. I went with 2 bolts on the shifter there, and it seems to be quite secure with them torqued down properly. And there's no real twisting going on with the mount where it's attached to that 40 series. Back over here, I can put my hand on this thing and pull on it. And there's a little bit of motion there. Of course, I'm pulling from this side towards me. When I'm in the seat, I'll be pulling out this way from the seat, reaching that way. So it'll be more this way pulling. But there is some, you can see some movement here, I think. I don't know how well it's going to look on the video, but there is some side-to-side flex. But, of course, most of the motion I'll be putting on this is going to be backwards, straight along the plane here that the shifter mount is mounted on. That's going to take a lot of that out of it. The new plate that has that tactile arm in there for the shifter, that ball bearing spring assembly, you can definitely feel the difference when you're using it. The handle for the shifter is very tight. There's no flex in that handle at all, or rather the knob where it attaches to the lever. So this feels good. And the yellow spring with the green, It feels okay. Again, it's going to be hard to tell until I get in and start driving. And then I might change something there. I might change the preload. I might change a spring. Who knows? Once we get in there and we're using it, then we'll be able to tell better where I would like to have it. And of course, that's totally subjective at the end of the day. And you can see where we have our USB hanging down underneath. I just routed it down towards the front of the rig where my computer is. So there it is. We have it all mounted securely and we're ready to go drive. All right, we're in iRacing. We're in the, what are we in? Ford Fiesta. Yeah, it's Sonoma Rally, and we're using the handbrake here. And, you know, a handbrake doesn't do much. At the end of the day, it's just a handbrake, right? We're just pulling on it, trying to get the rear end to come around for us. And it does that, obviously, quite well. But it's a full-size control, and anytime you have a full-size control bolted solidly to your rig, it really adds to the immersion, as you might imagine, and the pleasure of using it. And that's no exception here. The solid aluminum handle here, it feels very good underhand, very ergonomic. I never lost my grip on it, which is an important thing, obviously, with a handbrake. I did end up changing the yellow spring to the blue one to get it to where I liked it, and it felt good to me. Of course, that's very subjective. Just because I like something doesn't mean somebody else is going to like it, but that's what I ended up with. I just don't have any video of me using the blue one, and I kept the green bumper in there. So again, you know, the handbrake's just doing what it's supposed to do. I was able to get repeatable reaction from the rear end when I used it, and that's what it's all about in the day, being able to be consistent with what you're doing when you're controlling the car. The sequential shifter, with the new element they have in there that we saw, if you saw that, is really a difference right away. As soon as you get in the car and you use that sequential shifter based against the old sequential element that they had, yeah, you can tell right away. Now there's a click at the end of the travel when we're pushing the knob forward or we're pulling it backwards, and that definitely adds more tactile feedback that feels like you're doing something even more than we did before. And the knob is doing a great job here with the new collet system. It did come loose on me once, and I tightened it back down good again, and it didn't come loose again, although I only had a couple hours on it. But I think one of the problems is my shaft that's on my shifter had the old system on there, had the set screws in that actually kind of galled up the shaft, so it's not real smooth there, as you may have seen if you watched the other parts of the review. So I need to get in there with some micro mesh sandpaper and work my way up through the grits and get that polished up again nice and smooth, and I think that'll probably take care of it because it gives more surface area for that collet system to grip on. So overall in the package, mounted like this, by the way, the mounting, as you can see here if you've been watching it, I don't see any movement here or anything substantial that would make me think, you know, this is not a solid unit, and it felt very solid underhand. So I really can't complain about the way I have it mounted. Although, again, like I said before, if I was going to use this all the time as my only setup, I would do something different because even though it felt solid underhand, I know there's flex in there and I can't stand knowing it's there. So I would come up with a different solution that would still do the same thing. But yeah, no flex at all. But I can't really see much going on here and really couldn't tell the difference when I was using it. So yeah, that's about it. You know, the handbrake does what it's supposed to do. Final thoughts on the VNM handbrake and updated parts for the VNM shifter. Out of the box, the handbrake presents as a well-finished and constructed control. It uses 8mm thick aluminum plates in most of its design, with a 10mm thick unit used in the mounting plate section. The handle is 185mm long and has a diameter of 35mm at its thickest area. It feels good in hand due to the tapered angle used along its length. There is an angle adjustment element integrated into the travel stop section that uses a Fibroflex elastomer unit to keep the handle's return quiet. The load cell used is the industry-proven Mavin brand with a 100 kilogram load limit. Resistance is provided by a selectable spring and Fibroflex elastomer stack. There are various spring rates to choose from. This stack rides on a steel rod inserted into an aluminum rod end unit sporting steel sealed bearings. The whole unit pivots on a rod seated in another set of sealed bearings. This provides the user with a very smooth pull when actioning the handbrake, with no lateral play detected. The new updated shifter now uses a conical collet system similar to those used in mills and lathes to attach the knob to the shifter shaft. This provides more contact surface area when tightening the knob than the old set screw design. The other update VNM sent me was a new sequential shifter plate assembly. They added a rocker plate to the old design that actuates a spring tensioned ball bearing riding in a brass cup. There is a noticeable improvement to the tactile feedback you get when actioning this lever's notches against that ball bearing. I like the improvements that VNM has made here with these updated parts. When driving the handbrake shifter combination, I felt that they complemented each other. I was able to get the handbrake tuned to my personal preference without too much trial and error, which resulted in me feeling like the car reacted to my handbrake inputs as it should. The new sequential shifting element now provides a nice tactile click where there was none before. Overall, I like what I have seen from VNM so far. They make a well thought out set of controls that have a fit and finish that is among the best that I have used. I'm Barry Rowland. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.